we have to transition to our kids. We have goals for them. But how do we get them to make the goals for themselves?
I'm so glad you asked that question because so often, as you said, we have goals for our kids, but you know, we don't share them with our kids, or we don't sit down with our kids and say, hey, what are your goals? And, part of the transition team IEP meeting is supposed to be to work together to set those goals. But I've been
Mm-hmm.
in schools where high school kids don't even attend their transition IEP meetings or any IEP meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I met a parent once who said, my son doesn't know he has an IEP. And I'm like, your son is 17 years old and he's in high school. I think he knows.
Right.
He was trying to protect him, and I appreciate that. But, if you can't sit down and set goals together, and it's hard to hear things, or it's hard to hear that your child's goals aren't what your goals are, or to hear that their goals are to be a fighter pilot, and you know that they're not going to be. But I don't think
Mhm.
that that means you don't have the discussion. And
Right.
we have this thing called person-centered transition planning in the state of New Jersey, where um, Rutgers University actually goes into the transition meetings and works with the parents. And it's kind of like counseling because you're
Mm-hmm.
all in there together and you're figuring out, like, you know, one of the examples is a young man who is in a wheelchair and he says to his parents, well, I want to be a therapist. And they're like, you can't be a therapist. And he's like, well, why can't I? And he
Mm.
didn't have a cognitive disability. So there really wasn't any reason why he couldn't be a therapist. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Just had to find some way to adapt what he was doing. And yeah,
exactly.
definitely. Yeah, that is so true. They can dream much bigger a lot of times than we can. If we remove those barriers of, well, it hasn't been done or we've never seen it done, and so therefore it won't be.
And a lot of it too is, we don't want our kids to fail. And
Mm.
I, it's kind of corny, but there's that saying that fail really means first attempt in learning.
Mm.
And when my oldest son, he had two false starts at college and now he's in the right, he found the right place for him. But, you know, for us, the failure was, we didn't want him to be sad or hurt or whatever, and then there's the financial aspect. Well, it costs money to go to college and you've had these two opportunities that you weren't successful at. And then, you have brothers and sisters who are looking up to you and,
Mm.
so and helping him to find his voice to say, yes, I know I made this mistake or I made that mistake, but here's what I've learned from it and here's what's going to be
Mm.
different next time. And there's, a certain level of maturity too that has to happen first.
Right. Yeah. You can't just squash the goal before they try to achieve it because
Yeah.
who knows? They may, or again, like you said, they may learn something in the process that they needed to learn to get to a more adequate goal. And all of us shoot to the moon, if we have a good self-worth about us, we think we can do way more than we can. And sometimes it takes those humiliating things in our lives to bring us a little more down to earth.
Yeah. And it's like the growth mindset too. Like we have to think that they can improve. We have to think that they can do better and they can do more. Because if we
Yeah.
don't think that, they're going to rise to the levels and the expectations that we set for them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, why my kid would pretend like he couldn't write an essay in school when he was home writing, comic books and graphic novels. So, um,
Right.
you know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just remember my brother. He has severe dyslexia, and he said he was told day after day in high school just that he would never accomplish anything, that he'd never have. And he goes, I was going to prove them wrong. But how many kids actually have the perseverance to do that? Not many. The other ones just believe it and they succumb to this. I'm never going to do everything because that's what everybody's told me. And this is my life.
that makes me sad that that happens, and it does happen every day. People tell kids they can't do something or they can't be something. And that's why it's so important for kids to find their voice and to find their people, their tribe, their, that person that's going to support them and,
Mhm.
encourage them and challenge them and tell them don't be afraid to fail, or you know what, let's see what you need to do to be a fighter pilot. I don't know.
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and then assess it and figure out what's doable if it's
yeah,
doable.